So what made you originally want to do a film about consciousness, psychedelics? Like, we don't have to get too far into it, but like, tell us your first initial thoughts.
Yeah, well, it's very much around. It has been. It was then, and it's even more so now. A topic that just kept coming up in different spaces and different places. And two particularly key moments for me, I think, in the starting of this film. Someone handed me a book by a guy called Stanislav Grof, a Czech psychiatrist who discovered the use of LSD in his psychotherapy with his patients in the 1950s and 60s. And he's still around today, I believe. So someone handed me Stan's first book called Realms of the Human Unconscious. And it just blew my mind. You know, some of the stuff that he was encountering in these psychotherapy sessions, you know, was just incredible. And it was clear that he was a very conservative guy. He wasn't coming at this from the far edges of anywhere. He was a conservative Freudian psychiatrist working in the 1950s, but he was also a scientist, and he refused to ignore evidence that made him uncomfortable or went against the paradigms he was working in at that time. So that was a real key. And I would say the other key was a TED talk I watched by Graham Hancock that he got into some trouble with TED about, which I believe was called The War on Consciousness. And that was going to be the title of the film originally. But I was so impressed by the way that Graham squeezed so much information and ideas and thoughts into that very short talk. You know, that was just like lighting a match. And those two things happened in quite a short space of time. And so that was the beginning of Journeys.
That's awesome. I mean, my particular psychedelic journeys for that was reading Albert Hoffman's LSD, My Problem Child. And that was totally revolutionary for me because, again, like you said, a conservative scientist just doing science and then just blown away by results. And so it was just very interesting that's Stanislav Grof and Graham Hancock. That's interesting. Okay. And then so what do psychedelics have to do with consciousness, though?
They've got everything to do with consciousness. And what haven't they got to do with consciousness? They are, again, you know, it's not all about Grof, but he's a very wise man, and he talks about them as a non-specific catalyst of consciousness. He talks about them as he sees them as a potential tool for studying consciousness. You know, the analogy that I'm sure a lot of people have heard is, he made the analogy between, I think it was, you know, it's what the microscope did for biology or the telescope did for astronomy. Astrology. Which one?
Astronomy.
Astronomy, thank you. I always get the two confused.
Quite all right.
So him and Hoffman and so many other people, you know, point out, and there was so much interesting research done in the 50s and 60s here in the UK and in the States and in Czechoslovakia around these substances and what potentials they have, what they might be able to reveal to us about who we are and what we're about and where we're headed.
Right. And then so with that, I mean, you basically, the subtitle of the film, 3 Psychedelic Trips That Changed the World. You chose 3 like heavyweights in this, Timothy Leary, Aldous Huxley, and Alan Watts. Timothy Leary obviously coming from Harvard, kind of renowned as the problem child or troublemaker, etc. Aldous Huxley being the British kind of mathematician, right? Was he? Or
no, he was an author.
Excuse me. Yeah. I think of someone. And then Alan Watts, the philosopher, who had more of a Eastern kind of religion. So why those 3?
I think it started with about 12.
Okay.
I think the long list was
Can you tell us, like, maybe who's, I mean, you don't have to give us all 12, but who were some that got cut off?
I can't, but just in case there's a
Okay.
sequel, I don't want to give away
Okay.
the material.
Oh.
But I can say there's quite a few big names that you'd recognise in there.
Sure. Well, I mean, I have some names here that I'll mention. Maybe we'll see if you get a response. Maybe we'll do it that way. Alex Gray, Anthony Bourdain, Sam Harris, Jean-Paul Sartre, Carrie Mullis, Carlos Santana, Steve Jobs, the Beatles. Oh, okay. Richard Feynman. That's my favorite. That's what I want to hear about is Richard Feynman, just so you know.
Who's Richard Feynman?
Richard Feynman, he's basically the guy, he was like the most famous physicist since Einstein. You know, he basically did quantum electrodynamics, and he was like one of the greatest like science educators. But you should look, we'll talk after.
Okay.
But Bill Gates, and then...
Is this a list of people who've taken psychedelics?
Oh yeah,
Right.
oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I got plenty if you need any. And then George Carlin. So there's plenty there. But even already talking about a sequel, that's interesting.
Who knows? But I've been asked a lot about this list, and
I'm assuming so. Yeah.
I want to keep them trade secrets for now. But the point is, I began reading, and I at that point, you know, I'm born here in the West. My reference points were the Western culture.
Sure.
And what has the West had to say about psychedelics? So I guess I went back to the pioneers. There were people that came before Leary, Huxley, and Watts, but they were you know some of the big early day pioneers. And I read a lot, and stuff stuck out. As I say, there was maybe 12, and then 12 became 8, and then 8 became 4, and then 4 became 3, and it just sort of happened by various different powers of erosion, luck, chance, and whatever else.
Sure. I mean, in those three, though, I think you have a very good broad swath, at least in the 50s, 60s, because, again, Timothy Leary at Harvard, Aldous Huxley here in the UK, and then Alan Watts, again, like on the west coast of California, but he had so much. I think he was like one of the first, you know, Westerners to be allowed to like even practice Buddhism or Zen Buddhism in the East. So, I mean, you kind of traverse the world a little bit, even though your focus is on the West.
Yeah, well, I mean, Huxley was a Brit, Watts was a Brit, and Michael Hollingshead, who gave Timothy Leary his first LSD trip, was a Brit. So all three stories feature Brits prominently.
Okay.
So I like to think, you know, we played a quiet but important part in that picture. Although Huxley's mescaline experience in the film Doors of Perception actually took place in LA, in Hollywood, where he was living and working as a screenwriter. And Watts too was California.
California as well.
So it was all happening in America, but there was a lot of Brits behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Kind of shuffling
Seems like we're in a
things.
good spot then in California. So then, what? Just so for people before they watch the film, it is partly animated. You have a lot of interview experts, so we'll get to that. But so why did you want to animate it? Obviously, other than Alan Watts and Aldous Huxley not being alive with us anymore.
Yeah, and Leary.
Oh, yeah, right. So all three not with us anymore.
Yeah, I'm trying to go back and sort of tap into that original impulse. Where did it start?
Because I mean, the obvious thing would be, you know, like record. I mean, you used I'm assuming like transcripts and stuff, but like there's plenty of video of these people,
Yeah.
you know, around and stuff.
It was something about the specifics of those three stories. For instance, like I think my starting point was was a section from Leary's story, kind of the peak of his experience maybe, or the lead up to it, when he has that confrontation or that run-in with his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And he's forced to face the kind of shallow, superficial way in which he's been conducting himself in the world, in his life and with his family, and the painful realizations that come of it. So the film began life as a kind of 2-3 minute animation of just that section with Leary and his daughter. And I think there's something about the psychedelic experience it's a bit like people telling you their dreams. It's very difficult to grasp hold of and for people to convey to each other. And to talk about clearly. And I thought, I picked these authors partly because they wrote about such ephemeral and difficult to grasp subjects so clearly. And then animation just seemed like the natural way to visualize it.
I think it was it's definitely an upgrade from like those videos that you could have used, because I mean, animation, and storytelling like that, it really can capture more than just reality.